What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a simple chat about his incredible career, only to face a barrage of disrespectful questions that cross every line imaginable? It only took one comment about his personal life for the entire interview to spiral into one of the most shocking television moments ever broadcast on daytime TV. This is the moment Michael Caine walked off the Loose Women set, and nobody saw it coming. The interview started innocently enough. Michael Caine, the legendary actor known for his roles in countless classic films, had been invited onto Loose Women to discuss his latest project. He walked onto the set with his trademark charm, that distinctive voice greeting the panel with warmth and professionalism. The audience applauded as he took his seat, ready for what should have been a pleasant conversation. Denise Welch sat at the center of the panel, flanked by fellow panelists Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore. The atmosphere seemed friendly at first. Cameras rolled. The show went live. Denise started with a smile. "Michael, lovely to have you here. Now, before we talk about your new film, I have to ask something everyone wants to know." Michael nodded politely, settling into his chair. "Of course, fire away." "Your marriage has lasted decades in an industry where relationships crumble left and right," Denise said, her tone shifting slightly. "What's the secret? Or should I say, what's the arrangement?" The question hung in the air like a lead balloon. Jane Moore's eyes narrowed slightly. Kay Adams cleared her throat, but Denise kept smiling, waiting for an answer. Michael maintained his composure, though a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Arrangement is an interesting word choice." "Well, you know what I mean," Denise continued, leaning back in her chair with an air of casual authority. "Hollywood marriages, celebrity couples, they work differently than regular relationships, don't they?" "I wouldn't know," Michael replied evenly. "I've only had my marriage, and it works the same as any good relationship. Love, trust, communication." The other panelists exchanged glances. Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The audience fell silent. Michael's smile tightened just a fraction. "Well, my wife and I have mutual respect, and we genuinely enjoy each other's company. It's quite simple, really." "Simple," Denise repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "But come on, Michael. You're telling me there's no secret? No understanding between you two about what happens on location shoots?" Nadia Sawalha jumped in quickly. "I think what Denise means is that maintaining any relationship takes work, doesn't it?" Michael turned to Nadia gratefully. "Absolutely. Communication is key. Trust. Being present when you're together, rather than letting work consume everything." But Denise wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "That's a lovely answer, but you didn't really answer my question, did you? I'm talking about the reality of being a handsome leading man surrounded by beautiful actresses for months at a time." The studio went dead quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to tense up. Michael's jaw tightened. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Denise." "I'm not implying anything," Denise shot back. "I'm asking directly. Do you and your wife have an open marriage?" Jane Moore's eyes went wide. "Denise, I don't think that's—" "It's a fair question," Denise interrupted, not breaking eye contact with Michael. "Our viewers want to know how these things really work in Hollywood." Michael sat back, his legendary composure being tested. "My marriage is built on love and fidelity. That's all anyone needs to know." "Fidelity?" Denise said with a laugh that sounded more like a scoff. "That's interesting coming from someone who's played so many characters who cheat on their wives." Kay Adams tried to intervene. "Those are roles, Denise. Let's talk about Michael's new—" "I'm just saying," Denise continued, talking over Kay. "There's often truth in the roles we choose, isn't there, Michael?" Michael's face had gone from warm to cold. "I choose roles based on the quality of the script and the character's complexity, Not because I identify with every aspect of their personal lives. That's called acting. The tension was thick enough to cut. The audience sat in stunned silence. You could hear every breath, every shuffle. Denise smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Touchy subject, I see. Let's move on then. Your career has spanned what, 60 years now? Something like that, Michael replied tersely. That's a long time to stay relevant, Denise said. Some might say you've been lucky to avoid being canceled in this day and age. Nadia's mouth dropped open. Denise, what are you... Denise continued, ignoring Nadia completely. You've made films in different eras, with different standards. Surely there are things you did back then that wouldn't fly today. Michael's knuckles had gone white as he gripped the armrest. I've always conducted myself professionally and treated everyone on set with respect. Everyone? Denise challenged. Every single person? Come on, Michael. We've all heard the stories about how things were on film sets in the 60s and 70s. The parties, the excess, the behavior that would shock people today. Michael's expression hardened. I don't know what stories you've heard, but they don't involve me. I showed up, did my job, and went home. Really? Denise pressed, a smirk playing at her lips. You expect us to believe that? A young, handsome actor in swinging London, surrounded by models and actresses, and you were a perfect angel? Kay Adams cut in sharply. Denise, this is getting completely out of hand. I'm simply asking about his experiences, Denise said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. No, you're making accusations, Jane Moore said firmly. There's a difference between asking about someone's career and implying they behaved improperly. Michael looked at Jane appreciatively. Thank you. I'm happy to discuss my career, my films, the craft of acting, but I won't sit here and defend myself against vague accusations that have no basis in fact. Vague? Denise scoffed. I think I'm being quite specific. The 60s and 70s were wild times. Everyone knows that. I'm just asking if you participated in that culture. Denise turned to Jane with barely concealed irritation. I'm just asking what our audience is thinking. I don't think the audience is thinking that at all, Kay Adams added, trying to restore some sanity to the conversation. But Denise wasn't backing down. She turned back to Michael. Let me put it another way. Looking back at your career, is there anything you regret? Any behavior you'd like to apologize for? Michael stared at her for a long moment. I regret nothing about how I've conducted my career. I've worked hard, treated people well, and earned my place in this industry through talent and dedication. How noble, Denise said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But surely someone who's been around as long as you must have some skeletons in the closet. The other panelists looked horrified. Nadia put her hand on Denise's arm. That's enough. Denise shook her off. I'm conducting an interview. You're conducting an interrogation, Michael said quietly, his voice like steel. And I didn't come here to be accused of things I haven't done. Nobody's accusing you of anything, Denise replied with false innocence. I'm just asking questions. Loaded questions, Michael corrected. Disrespectful questions based on nothing but your own assumptions and desire to create controversy. The audience began to murmur. Some people shifted in their seats. Others whispered to their neighbors. The energy in the studio had completely changed from the warm welcome Michael had received just minutes earlier. Denise's face flushed, but she pushed on. Controversy? I'm just doing what good journalists do, asking the hard questions that need to be asked. Hard questions require hard evidence, Michael shot back, his legendary calm beginning to crack. You don't have any. You're fishing for something scandalous where nothing exists. Nadia jumped in, trying to diffuse the situation. Why don't we talk about your latest film? I heard the director was someone you'd wanted to work with for years. Michael turned to her with visible relief. Yes, actually. The script was brilliant, and the director had this vision that really... But Denise interrupted. I'm sorry. But I think our viewers deserve answers to these questions before we move on to promotional material. Jane, Moore's voice rose in anger. Promotional material? Michael came here as a favor to this show. He didn't have to accept this invitation. And this is how you treat him? I treat him like I'd treat any guest, Denise retorted, with honesty and directness. Denise's face flushed. I think our viewers have a right to know who they're watching on screen. They know exactly who I am, Michael said, his voice rising slightly. I've been transparent about my life and career for decades. What you're doing right now has nothing to do with journalism or entertainment. This is something else entirely. Kay Adams jumped in. Michael, I apologize. Let's talk about your new film. I heard it's quite different from... Oh, let him answer, Denise snapped at Kay. Then, turning back to Michael, you seem very defensive for someone with nothing to hide. That was it. That was the line that changed everything. Michael Caine, a man known for his professionalism and grace under pressure, stood up from his chair. The movement was so sudden that it startled everyone. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their shots. I've been in this industry for over 6 decades, Michael said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. I've sat through thousands of interviews with journalists from all over the world. I've answered difficult questions with honesty and respect. But I will not sit here and be treated like a criminal by someone who clearly has no interest in a real conversation. Denise's eyes widened. You're being overly sensitive. Sensitive? Michael repeated. You've questioned my marriage, implied I'm unfaithful, suggested I've behaved inappropriately throughout my career, and accused me of hiding dark secrets. All without a shred of evidence. All based on nothing but your desire to create drama for ratings. Jane Moore started to speak. Michael, please, not all of us. I know, Michael said, his tone softening as he looked at Jane, Kay, and Nadia. You 3 have been trying to steer this in a better direction. I appreciate that, but I won't stay somewhere I'm not respected. Denise stood up now too, her face red. You think you're too good for this show? I think I deserve the same courtesy I extend to others, Michael replied, something you clearly don't understand. The studio had gone completely silent. Not a single person moved. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to decide what to do. How dare you, Denise said, her voice shaking with anger. You come on our show and insult me. I've insulted you. Michael's eyebrows shot up. You spent the last 15 minutes trying to destroy my reputation on live television, and I'm the one insulting you? Nadia stood up, trying to calm things down. Let's all just take a breath, and... No, Michael said firmly. I'm done here. I came to talk about my work, to share stories about filmmaking, to give your viewers something entertaining and hopefully insightful. Instead, I've been ambushed. Denise pointed a finger at him. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest, Michael countered. You wanted drama, Denise. You wanted a moment. Well, you've got one, but it's not the moment you were hoping for. He started to remove his microphone. The sound technician rushed forward to help, but Michael waved him off politely, handling it himself with practiced ease. His hands were steady, betraying none of the anger that must have been coursing through him. The camera operator zoomed in, capturing every moment. This was television history, happening in real time. Kay Adams stood now, looking distressed, her voice breaking slightly. Michael, on behalf of the show, I'm so sorry. This isn't how we wanted this to go. This isn't who we are. I know, Kay, Michael said gently, his voice softening for her. You've been nothing but professional. Same with Jane and Nadia. You tried to stop this. I saw that. I appreciate that. But one person can poison the whole well, can't they? Nadia stood as well, reaching out toward Michael. Please, can we start over? Can we talk about what you actually came here to discuss? Michael looked at her kindly, but shook his head. The damage is done, love. I can't unhear what's been said. And honestly, I shouldn't have to sit here and pretend it's okay. It's not okay. Denise's face was now a deep shade of red, her jaw clenched tight. You can't just walk off in the middle of a live show. That's unprofessional. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on anyone. Several audience members gasped audibly. Someone in the back actually laughed in disbelief. Michael looked at her, and for a moment his expression was almost pitying. Unprofessional? You want to talk about what's professional and what isn't? After what just happened here? I asked legitimate questions, Denise insisted, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. You asked intrusive, baseless questions designed to humiliate me, Michael corrected her. You questioned my integrity, my marriage, my entire career, and you did it with a smile on your face, like that somehow made it acceptable. Michael looked at her, and for a moment, his expression was almost pitying. Watch me. The audience gasped. Some people started to applaud, unsure of what else to do. Others sat in shocked silence. Jane Moore was visibly upset. This is not what Loose Women stands for. Perhaps you should tell that to your colleague, Michael said, gesturing toward Denise. Denise wasn't backing down. You're proving my point. If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be running away. Michael stopped at the edge of the set and turned back. I'm not running from anything. I'm walking away from disrespect. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that difference says everything about why I'm leaving. He looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching, I apologize that you didn't get the interview you deserved. I came here in good faith. Unfortunately, that wasn't reciprocated. Then he looked at Denise one last time. You know what the saddest part of all this is? You had one of the most respected actors in British cinema sitting right in front of you, willing to share decades of experience and stories. And you threw it all away because you couldn't resist trying to tear someone down. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just sad. With that, Michael Caine walked off the Loose Women set. His footsteps echoed in the silent studio. The cameras followed him until he disappeared through the studio doors. The remaining panelists sat in stunned silence. Denise looked furious. Kay had tears in her eyes. Jane and Nadia appeared shell-shocked. The show went to an emergency commercial break, but the damage was done. The audience sat buzzing with conversation. Camera phones had been out, recording every second. Within minutes, clips would be circulating online. When the show came back from commercial, Denise tried to maintain her composure. Well, that was unexpected. Unexpected? Nadia said, her voice sharp. Denise, you attacked that man for no reason. I was doing my job, Denise protested. Kay Adams shook her head. Your job is to interview guests, not interrogate them about their personal lives with baseless accusations. Jane Moore added, Michael Caine has been nothing but a gentleman throughout his entire career. He didn't deserve any of that. Denise crossed her arms. I think he overreacted. The look on the other panelists' faces said everything. They disagreed completely. He overreacted? Nadia repeated, incredulous. You questioned his marriage, his fidelity, his professional conduct, and suggested he had dark secrets. How was he supposed to react? By answering the questions, Denise insisted stubbornly. He did answer, Jane pointed out. Multiple times. You just didn't like the answers, so you kept pushing. Kay looked directly into the camera. To our viewers and to Michael Caine, I want to apologize. That was not the interview we planned, and it's not reflective of how we normally conduct ourselves on this show. Denise sat silently, her jaw clenched. Jane continued. Michael Caine is a legend in every sense of the word. He's given us incredible performances for over 6 decades. He deserved better than what happened here today. Nadia nodded in agreement. Absolutely, and I hope he knows that most of us have nothing but respect for him and his career. The show struggled on for the remaining time, but the energy was completely gone. Every topic felt hollow after what had just happened. The other panelists could barely look at Denise. The audience remained subdued. In the green room, Michael Caine was already gone. His publicist had whisked him out of the building as quickly as possible. Production staff who had worked with him said he remained polite and gracious even as he left, thanking the crew for their work despite the disaster of the interview. Back on set, as the show wound down to its conclusion, the tension between the panelists was palpable. Denise tried to maintain her defiant stance, but it was clear from the body language of the other women that they were not on her side. Kay Adams, ever the professional, managed to bring the show to a close. Thank you for watching Loose Women today. Join us tomorrow for, hopefully, a much smoother show. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, Nadia turned to Denise. What were you thinking? I was asking the questions people want answered, Denise said defensively. No, Jane said firmly. You were trying to create a controversy where none existed. You were trying to make yourself the star of the show by tearing down a guest who came here in good faith. That's not fair, Denise protested. Kay stood up, gathering her notes. What's not fair is what you did to Michael. He's been nothing but a class act his entire career, and you treated him like he was on trial. The production crew began dismantling the set, pointedly avoiding eye contact with Denise. Even the technical staff, who normally stayed neutral no matter what happened during filming, seemed upset by what they had witnessed. In the control room, the producers were already fielding calls. The switchboard was lighting up with complaints. Social media was exploding with reactions. The overwhelming majority sided with Michael Caine. People were calling Denise's behavior unprofessional, disgraceful, and downright cruel. Comments flooded in from all corners. Fans of Michael Caine expressed outrage. Fellow actors and industry professionals tweeted their support for him. Even people who had never particularly followed his career were defending him, recognizing that what happened crossed a line. The three panelists who had tried to defend Michael found themselves being praised for their integrity. Viewers appreciated how Kay, Jane, and Nadia had attempted to steer the conversation back to respectful territory. They were seen as the voices of reason in an increasingly unreasonable situation. But for Denise, the reaction was harsh and immediate. People dissected every question she had asked, every implication she had made. They pointed out the lack of evidence for any of her insinuations. They noted how Michael had answered her questions honestly, only to have her twist his words and push for more. Television critics who watched the live broadcast were already writing their pieces. The consensus was clear. Denise Welch had crossed a line, and Michael Caine had been right to walk away. One veteran entertainment journalist wrote, "In all my years covering television, I've rarely seen a guest treated with such blatant disrespect. Michael Caine showed remarkable restraint before finally doing what anyone in his position should do, refusing to participate in his own character assassination." Another wrote, "This wasn't an interview. It was an ambush, and Michael Caine handled it with more grace than most people could have mustered under similar circumstances." The clip of Michael removing his microphone and delivering his final statement became the defining television moment of the year. His words, "You had one of the most respected actors in British cinema sitting right in front of you, willing to share decades of experience and stories, and you threw it all away," resonated with millions of people. It became a statement about respect, about professionalism, about knowing when to walk away from a toxic situation. People from all walks of life related to the moment of standing up for yourself when you've been pushed too far. Meanwhile, Michael Caine's team released a brief statement. Michael went on Loose Women today, expecting a professional interview about his work. Unfortunately, the conversation took a turn that was neither professional nor appropriate. Michael felt he had no choice but to remove himself from the situation. He bears no ill will toward the show or most of its panelists, but he will not subject himself to that kind of treatment. The statement was measured and dignified, which only made people respect him more. He didn't attack Denise personally. He didn't make demands or threats. He simply stated the facts and moved on, exactly as he had done during the interview itself. For Denise, the fallout was swift. Fellow television presenters distanced themselves from her comments. Industry insiders questioned her judgment, and viewers made it clear they didn't appreciate watching a beloved figure being treated so poorly. The other Loose Women panelists tried to minimize the damage. They gave interviews emphasizing that Denise's approach was not reflective of the show's values or how they typically treat guests. They reiterated their respect for Michael Caine and their regret over how the interview unfolded, but the damage was done. The interview would go down in television history, not as a triumph of hard-hitting journalism, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when ego and the pursuit of viral moments override basic decency and respect. Michael Caine, for his part, continued with his press tour for the film he had been promoting. Other interviewers treated him with the respect he deserved, and when asked about the Loose Women incident, he simply said, "I've moved on. Life's too short to dwell on unpleasant moments." That response, so typically gracious and mature, only reinforced what everyone already knew. Michael Caine was a class act. He had been a class act for over 60 years, and no amount of hostile questioning or unfounded accusations could change that fundamental truth. The incident became a masterclass in how to handle disrespect. Michael didn't lose his temper. He didn't resort to insults. He stated his position clearly, gave the person attacking him multiple chances to change course, and when they didn't, he removed himself from the situation with dignity intact. People watched the clip over and over, marveling at his composure, the way he delivered his final words, looking directly at the camera to apologize to the viewers who deserved better, the way he acknowledged the other panelists who had tried to help, the way he explained exactly why he was leaving without making it personal or petty. It was, in many ways, a performance worthy of his legendary status, except it wasn't a performance. It was real, and that made it all the more powerful. The moment when he said, "Watch me," after Denise told him he couldn't just walk off, became an instant classic. It was the perfect response to someone who thought they had power over him. Brief, pointed, and utterly final. Entertainment historians would later point to this interview as a turning point in how daytime talk shows conducted celebrity interviews. The backlash was so severe that producers across the industry took note. Guests were there to promote their work and share their experiences, not to be subjected to trial by television. For Michael Caine, it became another chapter in an already legendary life. The man who had starred in some of cinema's greatest films, who had worked with the best directors in the world, who had won multiple prestigious awards, now had another story to tell. The day he walked off a talk show because he refused to be disrespected. And true to form, he handled it with the same professionalism and grace that had defined his entire career. He didn't let it consume him. He didn't wage a public war. He simply stood up for himself, stated his truth, and walked away. That's what made Michael Caine a legend. Not just his acting ability, though that was considerable. Not just his longevity, though 6 decades in the business was remarkable. But his character, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to treating others well and expecting the same in return. The interview that was supposed to promote his latest film instead became a viral sensation for entirely different reasons. But in the end, that viral moment revealed something more important than any movie promotion could have. It showed the world who Michael Caine really was. A professional, a gentleman, a man who knew his worth and wouldn't let anyone diminish it. Someone who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away.